And what is that message? Again, this is the risk of getting in trouble, but I said this to a couple of friends. They got pretty mad at me, but again, politically correct versus politically direct, and I'll show you what I mean by that. There are a lot of slogans out there. And the Democrats, this isn't picking side, it's an observation. The Democrats, the left, they're amazing at emotional manipulation and sound bites. The rich can pay a little bit more. All of these sound bites, the Republicans don't have cool sound bites. I don't know why. It's like the rich can pay a little bit more, and then the Republicans want to argue the nuances of who's rich or who's not. Again, these are observations. But in the current mode of Black Lives Matter and BLM and this stuff with George Floyd, I became really frustrated. I'm finishing an article with a friend of mine. Yes, he's Black, African-American. If I say that, then I've been accused of being a racist because I pointed out that I'm co-authoring with a friend of mine who actually is African-American. We wanted to work together, but here's the point. Slogans are not substance. And I watched on the police all the time. It's like, oh, what are we marching for? Equal justice. That's a slogan, not a solution. Race relations, slogan. Better education. All right, that's a little bit of a slogan, but like how? What are the steps? What can we do if we, anybody, whoever a we is, want to support the movement? You can't support a movement with a slogan. My saying again is, awareness builds apathy, actions bring achievements. And I'm not saying people are apathetic to what's going on with the Floyd movement right now, but if you don't have something to do, if you're not pressing for change, systemic problems. Well, systemic problems means there's a problem with the system. So what is the system and what is the problem you're trying to fix? And I'm looking at all these: raise the consciousness, let the voices be heard, join together for change. Those are slogans. It was so frustrating, so frustrating. So started looking at the problem, started trying to backfill into what's really going on. And again, I've had a pretty good life. Yes, I'm white. I grew up in the South, so I've been around Black and African American my whole life. I don't see color. At least I don't think I do. I hope I don't. I see people for their actions. I've got a lot of great friends that I hope would attest to that with me. But when I looked at it, I started saying, well, wait a minute. If the problem isn't really, again, the numbers are the numbers. The problem isn't really police are out there hunting and killing Black people. I hate to say it that way, but when you look at the numbers, people get mad at you. This year in 2019, I think there's been 20 white people killed by police and 9 Black individuals killed by police officers. And out of that, I think the numbers are like 6 had a gun or criminal, and out of the white people is 12 or 13. The numbers are the numbers. You can dispute them all you want. You can call me a racist. You can lie. That's the numbers. But that's not what I thought was the real premise. And so I started having a conversation. And what I started looking at, and this again, I think is what some of the title's going to be, is there's a difference, I believe, and in talking, I'm getting a little validation. There's a difference between harassment and homicide. And that is where I think the distinctions really start coming in. White privilege, call it whatever you want. For the most part, I can walk down the street and not be stopped because I'm in my own neighborhood. I have Black friends that can't happen to. I could go jogging and not get run over and shot like happened to Ahmaud Arbery. I could probably get pulled out of a police car and not have those kinds of things happen to me. It's the constant perception and can't even think of the word, perpetuation of harassment and anger that starts building up. And then we started looking into it, and I was like, well, wait a minute. Let's take, for instance, the cop in Minnesota. He had 18 prior complaints against him. 18. That's harassment. Long before it got to the homicide of George Floyd, that is harassment. What's the harassment for? I was curious. I like looking at things. I said, oh, out of those 18, I want to see Is he only harassing black people? Is there a race? Is he harassing women more than men? Like, what's the predictive indicator? What's the pattern of abuse that builds up anger that led to that homicide? And when you start looking at how that officer is able to stay involved, it starts coming down to, and again, I'm going to get in trouble, it's the unions. It's the politics. When you say the system's broken, you've got to look at what's broken in the system. And one of the things that's broken is this aspect of self-policing. If a cop gets accused of a complaint, it's the cops that investigate themselves. Or a district attorney. How's the district attorney get his job? By politicking, going out, and he has to get votes. So who funds a lot of the district attorney's campaigns? The police unions. This is the circular side of systemic racism. I'm not picking colors. I wanted to get to a solution. Raising the consciousness doesn't do anything for me. 1, 2, 3, 4, what can you do? And so we started doing some research, trying to break this down. And then I watched the Democrats. The Democrats came out today with their plan, and they've got some good points in there, believe me, but it's interesting they're still not fully and fundamentally attacking one of the most systemic problems within the problem of systemic racism. And whether it's systemic racism or systemic harassment, it needs to be stopped. So I created something called S.T.O.P, and I'm going to share it with you here now. It may or may not work, but to me, I like to get to systems, like steps, something you can do that's not a political slogan. So S.T.O.P, it's called Stop Police, and I haven't figured out the rest of it, but S.T.O.P stands for something. It's an acronym. Number 1, S.T.O.P stands for Special Prosecutor. If a policeman is accused of harassment, it should not go to internal affairs and a district attorney who have a political motivation to not investigate the police. That is a fundamental systemic problem. Needs to go to a special prosecutor, outside counsel, somebody who doesn't have to run and suck up and get votes. And it just happened in Minneapolis and in Minnesota. It was forced to they took the George Floyd case from the district attorney up to Keith Ellison, who is the attorney general, to prosecute that case. That's why sometimes when something bad happens like Floyd, the Department of Justice comes in. You need an independent special prosecutor. And the most obvious one is that my friend Benjamin Crumb is doing an amazing job. He's the attorney for George Floyd. If you can support any of those causes, please pick one and support it. But they brought in their own autopsy. The internal autopsy for Floyd tried to cast aspersions on George Floyd. Again, I'm not picking sides, I'm just reading. Said he had amphetamines and had underlying heart conditions, and any of those could have contributed. Crumb's like, well, let's have our guys look at it. And the independent auditor said, yeah, he had all those things, but he died because somebody sat on his chest for 9 minutes. Independent auditors, you have to take the investigation out of the police. So the first S in STOP stands for special prosecutors. Second one is transparency. This is where I think blockchain could really do something interesting. We did research trying to find Siobhan. He's the police officer in Minnesota. And out of the 18 complaints, they're not public. We got access to about 8 or 9 of them, and they're verbal complaints. There's not a lot of information. You don't know the sex of the person. You don't know the age. You don't know if it was in their house or on the street or in the car. You need data, because with that transparent data becomes predictive analytics. And with predictive analytics comes accountability. You need to be able to hold an officer accountable or get rid of him when there's a pattern of harassment long before there is homicide. Has to happen. What does the O stand for? Other officers. Again, I'm using Floyd as an example. What a tragedy, but so many moving parts going on with that. There were officers who stood there. Apparently, some of them were also on the other end of Floyd, holding him down. And everybody that's looking after the fact, Monday quarterback, I would have rushed up there. I would have said, no, you wouldn't. You would have stood there on the porch or on the curb like everybody else and yelled at the police because nobody could believe the police were going to sit there and suffocate a guy. But the other police officers also have a duty to stand up and stop those efforts from happening. That's the O. That's immediate. This isn't education. People need more education. Has to happen over time. Better income for blacks. And I agree. But again, politically correct, politically direct. I had to make this point with a friend of mine who was saying it's all about education and income. And the amount of people that get stopped in a lower income may be higher. I don't know. But I have friends who are black. They're rich. They're educated. They still get stopped. Police officer can't look at somebody and go, oh, that guy's educated, I'm going to leave him alone. I want better education. I want better income. That's not the systemic part of the problem. The problem in the system is the harassment and where it stops and how do you stop it long before it becomes homicide. And the last one is promptness, prompt charging. Again, my numbers aren't exactly right. I'm pretty close to on, but it's interesting. It takes an average citizen, and any of you that have watched TV, there's something called the 48 hours. Right? Most crimes are solved within the first 48 hours, and they try and find that person and get them and arrest them and charge them. It happens quick. Average time for a police officer to get charged, if they even get charged, is 8 to 12 months. Think about that. If you're a family who lost a loved member, who had somebody harassed or beaten, or any of the atrocious things that a very small percent of the police population do, you want justice. You want that day in court. You don't want 8 to 12 months wondering if it's going to happen. That's why people are angry. I get it. I'd be angry. I'm scared when a police officer pulls up behind me and I don't usually get stopped. If I got stopped for no reason, I'd be angry. The system is broken, but we have to fix the system. So again, may or may not be the solution, but to me it was better than a slogan. But I like, STOP stood for Stop Police Brutality. That's what I wanted. That was my slogan, Stop Police Brutality. But the S.T.O.P stands for things that could be implemented now. Will people do it? I don't know. It's political. The Democrats came out with their plan today, and they didn't go after the police unions. They didn't make it clear that they're trying to take the prosecution away from the police. And there's a problem with that. And it's political and it's money motivated. It needs to change. So again, Stephen Meade, the Bullseye Guy. I don't always like to do these kind of rants. And again, I hope they come across in the spirit I mean them, because I want things to change. I have a lot of friends across the board. And if it's Black lives right now, that's fine. That's great. It might be a woman tomorrow. It might be a black woman. It might be anybody. The system has to change. I want to help change the system. That's it. Stephen Meade, the Bullseye Guy. Tune in next week. I can try and assure you it'll be a more lighthearted one, I hope. We'll see what happens between now and then. But I'm Stephen Meade, the Bullseye Guy.